Correspondent Axios, Ina Fried.
Thank you all for being here. I'm really excited for the conversation that we're going to have, both for the two amazing people that are part of it, but also the topic. I mean, this is what we're all talking about, thinking about, wondering. You know, the world we live in, the very technological world that we built with computers at the center is about to and is in the process of rapidly changing thanks to AI. And so I'm really excited to have a conversation about the key topics. You know, how is it changing? When is it going to change? What's that going to look like? What are the things that we should be thinking about? What are the things that we should be worrying about? What are the things that we actually don't need to worry about? So with all that said, let's bring up the people that are going to help have that conversation. So please help me welcome Richard Socher, the chief scientist for Salesforce, and the legendary Kai-Fu Lee, who I've known since his days at Microsoft and Google. So welcome. Hey, Richard. If you want to sit there. Hey, Kai-Fu. Great
Hello.
to see you again.
Thank you.
So I think what's always helpful in these discussions is help ground us for a second. Where are we today with AI? What's reality today versus the hype? All the buzzwords, everyone's an AI company. You know, they might, sell peanuts, but they're an AI company. So what's real today? Richard, I don't know if you want to start.
Sure. So I think we have to separate out two things, and that is the hype and the excitement where it's real and where it's not real. Where it's not real is the worry about artificial general intelligence, self-conscious AI algorithms that will decide on their own goals and basically change their own objective functions. That is still very far away. We don't really have a credible research path towards such algorithms. Where it is real is that it will impact pretty much every industry out there, and it will have an impact on jobs, and we have to very consciously think about the data sets that we train AI on. Pretty much all the advances that we've seen in the last couple of years came through supervised learning, where you have an input and you have an output. And if your input is are all the properties about somebody's background, and the output is whether they should get a loan or not, and you train that on banking data from the 70s, 80s, or 90s, where there may have been effects like redlining, where banks didn't want to give loans to African Americans, then you basically will ingrain these biases and then actually have potentially racist or sexist algorithms out there. So I think the bias issue comes up in a lot of different places, and recommendation engines, where once you click on one conspiracy video, you'll see a bunch of other crazy conspiracy videos on YouTube. These kinds of bias issues, those are the things that we have to think about and worry about.
And we're going to come back to that, because it's an issue I've been writing about a ton, and people in the industry have been talking about it, but I don't think people realize enough just how important this issue is. And if we don't get it right, the computers are going to learn this and have it almost permanently ingrained. The way I kind of think of it is, I have a 5-year-old, and he's not learning calculus, but he's in kindergarten, he's learning how he's going to learn. And that's kind of how I think about AI. They're not taking over the world, the robots aren't doing that, but they are starting to learn how they're going to learn and how they're going to make decisions. Kai-Fu, where do you see us at? What's real about AI today? What's actually changing a lot, and what hasn't yet changed that much?
Right. I certainly agree with everything Richard said, and I think the way to think about where AI can work is generally one single domain, and the more data you have, the better, generally speaking, and then the human determines the objective function that you want to optimize. And when those conditions are true, that you have high-quality data and a single domain, and there's a very clear objective function, then it can work really, really well. So on the bias question, in the companies that we funded, for example, loan companies that are trained on data not by human labeling, whether human tagged it as good to loan or not good to loan, but rather the actual outcome, whether the person defaulted or paid back. Then you have factual feedback, which I think some of the biases might be better. There could still be other issues you need to solve, but so basically, actual user, actual outcome-based tagging, I think, is important. Another part that I think is very interesting is the gradual platformization of AI. The efforts by Google, Amazon, Salesforce to bring AI down to a level that you don't have to be an expert to use. While that's not rocket science in itself, that's the kind of thing that makes iOS and Android platforms. And I think the day that we can really let any good software engineer program AI, I think this is really going to proliferate.
Well, and that's going to be critically important because a lot of the folks in here, the people that use Salesforce, the people that use all these platforms, the demand for talent is so high, you're not going to get an AI expert. They're going to be hired by Salesforce or by Google or by Microsoft or by Facebook. Where are we in the accessibilizing, which is not a word, or making available to all, this AI for all? We hear, again, a lot of hype. A lot of companies say, we make it so that we do all the hard stuff and you don't have to be an AI scientist. How real is that?
So I do think it is becoming more real. I think the software stack is getting more and more high level, right? You don't program assembler anymore, you don't program C++ anymore, it's like Python now. And even neural networks, you don't implement in Python directly, or CUDA on GPUs, you go one level higher and use TensorFlow or PyTorch that will do a lot of some of the underlying math automatically for you. And so in that sense, it is real. And at Salesforce Research, we also have the goal of not just pushing the state-of-the-art forward in research, but also making it widely accessible. And it's kind of surprising. You might sometimes ask, well, why would a private company have the goal of democratizing? Is it really democratizing versus like open sourcing? And there are two answers to that. One is, it's kind of amazing, but even companies are open sourcing code. We open source Transmogrify, we open source Deca NLP, a first model that solves 10 different NLP tasks in one single model, and we'll talk about that at the keynote later. But we also realized that to make AI actually successful in a company setting, you need three things. You need the data, the algorithms, and the workflows. Now, the algorithms are getting more and more commoditized with open source. The data is becoming a more and more unique asset for companies. But the workflows are really hard to understand, too. You have to have really great product people who actually understand when and where to infuse an AI outcome, a prediction, into the workflow of a service agent, into a chatbot, and what happens when a chatbot doesn't know an answer, and how to go back to a human, or self-driving cars. There's so many different kinds of workflows in all the different industries out there, and helping companies do that is something that I think several companies are getting better at, and you have to kind of focus and specialize also. We're just AI for CRM, and we're getting really good at making that quite easy to use.
So we've kind of set the stage of where we're at. You kind of made clear we're not anywhere close to artificial general intelligence. The computers taking over the world, that's still a ways off. Let's talk about where are we going in the short term? What is the advancement that we can see? And it's hard to say maybe 10 years out where we'll be, but what are the things that aren't possible today but are close? And you've done a ton of study in your new books looking at this, Kai.
Yeah.
Where are we close to? What are the things that AI we know is going to let us do in the next few years?
So in my new book, AI Superpowers, I think we have some copies for some of you later if you run fast. I talk about the waves of AI. And obviously, the first wave was with the internet, because that's the space where the largest amount of data became available with our tagging. And then the next level is business AI. I think that's the kind of work that Salesforce is leading really in. But you can also imagine other companies providing software for banks, for insurance companies, for hospital, for medical records. So really, for a lot of businesses, what you have had in the past was the requirement to keep data as an archive. It seems like a cost center to you. But now it actually becomes a gold mine, because that may help you, through AI, fit into your actual workflow and improve your ROI, improve your margin, improve your customer conversion, and reduce your costs. That's where we are right now. And I think we're starting to see is perception. That is where we're actually collecting new data, digitized data from physical world, such as speech and vision. Examples in the US are Amazon Go, Amazon Echo. They're collecting using computer vision and speech technologies, capturing things that were transient and lost in the past, and now creating new applications such as autonomous stores. And I think the automation through retail and even clinics and restaurants We in China are investing a lot in autonomous fast food, autonomous retail, autonomous malls. I think in the future we're going to be bifurcated with all the maximum efficiency delivered for convenience stores, supermarkets, and restaurants. The low end will all be made by robotics. There will be no human. Then the cost will be dramatically reduced. Of course, there will be high-end experience that's highly human curated. That's kind of the third wave. And then the fourth and final wave, that's the hardest one, is going to involve autonomous AI. That is, the AI actually has the equivalent of hands and arms and legs and feet, can move around. They may not really have feet, they may be wheels or a base, but nevertheless, it's able to do the job of agriculture, fruit picking, manufacturing, assembly line, inspection, and also things like commercial security, and also in, for example, dishwashing.
So we're not talking artificial general intelligence, but we're talking highly efficient, specialized, able to do maybe not whole jobs, but huge swaths of tasks.
That's right.
And how far away do you think that is?
Autonomous driving is the one with the biggest debate, right? The other cases, we're investing in a dishwashing robot, a strawberry picking robot. Those things are probably 1 or 2 years away. We're also helping companies like Foxconn to improve their inspection so that it doesn't have to be done visually by a human. That's probably 1 year away. So those things are nearer term using known technologies. Autonomous vehicle being an interesting one. The range is quite high, quite large. There are people who claim next year they'll be operational in some cities, basically semi-fully autonomous, like Waymo. And then there are people who are like Rodney Brooks, who are very pessimistic, who think it might be decades. I personally would pick something in the middle, maybe 5 to 10 years. What do you think?
Yeah, I think in 10 years you can make it. My hunch is if I was a self-driving car company, I would think again about the workflow and automate the 90% of highway driving, and then have somebody log in through a fast networks 5G and play the driving part of Grand Theft Auto and drive the last mile through the city, and then have this human interaction and they just log into another car. I feel like that is very feasible very soon.
Yeah, makes sense.
And there's a bunch of things that are raised by this future. So the first that gets talked about a ton, but is super important, is if that strawberry picking robot and the dishwashing robot and the highway driving robots taking care of trucks, that's a lot of jobs. How confident are you that society is prepared to shift its labor force as dramatically, probably more dramatically than in other revolutions, the Industrial Revolution, Agricultural Revolution, but those occurred over, I would imagine, a much longer time period than this one will occur?
Yeah, that actually is the primary reason I wrote the book, AI Superpowers. It's not so much about US and China, but about the biggest issue that I personally think will come about with the adoption of AI, because AI is so good in a single domain to do routine jobs at higher than human capability, and it's not just blue collar, but also white collar jobs. So the displacement of routine jobs is a substantial issue. I think while those of you in the audience, your jobs are challenging, creative, strategic, and so on, but if you really look at the whole world's population, at least half the people are largely doing repetitive routine jobs that are likely to be able to be better done and much lower cost by AI in the next 15 years. So I think there will be a large displacement that will naturally happen because companies want to save money and adopt technologies. And I think it is incumbent upon us to figure out how to do two big issues. Well, one is really the retraining of the displaced people and figuring out what jobs might not be done by AI. And the second is basically a redistribution of income so that the rich don't get richer and the poor get poorer. In terms of what jobs might be still available, I think obviously there's the creative axis, but you probably cannot easily turn routine job worker into a creative job very easily. Another angle is the compassionate angle, that is service jobs that require human touch. Jobs like nurses, elderly caretaker, jobs like tourist guide, even the future of doctors. might have that human component, but I think those jobs won't naturally be created out of advancement in AI. It will take government, corporations, and all of us to think about how to create more jobs in those areas. And I think we need and want them because humans want more time to interact with each other. And I think AI coming about replacing routine jobs is perhaps pushing us to do what we should do anyway, the creation of more humanistic service jobs.
So that's the jobs piece. Another huge one, we were talking about this a little backstage, is where does privacy fit in? And again, the limits of surveillance before the advent of computers were a human being actually had to hear you say something or watch you to be surveilled. Now we're willingly putting a microphone and a camera and calling it an Alexa or calling it a Google Home. What is the future of privacy in this world? How important is it that we have a conversation around it? And who's thinking about it? Who's taking action? Maybe Richard.
So we think about it a lot. Trust is our number one value at Salesforce. That sentence is burned into my brain. And it's something that we care about a lot. We were GDPR compliant before it was required, even though for a lot of our customers it's not yet required. But we think it's actually a good policy and good law. I personally think the right to be forgotten could be also useful. I think coming from Germany and from Europe, maybe there's a different perspective on some of these things. So I think privacy is important. Sometimes, unfortunately, there's a balance between regulation and innovation. And it's true, for instance, in a ecosystem in Germany, for instance, that has a lot less startups and would actually benefit from regulation that would help them thrive more. It's actually harder for a small startup to be GDPR compliant. And now, if 100 customers every week say, oh, I want my data to be out, and they have to retrain their classifiers, that can be a significant cost to a smaller company. Whereas big companies like Google or Salesforce don't struggle as much with keeping track of some of these things. Now, it also, of course, depends on your business model. And our business model is such that our companies and our customers own their own data. We don't own the data. We don't resell it. We don't try to sell advertisement on top of it. So it's much easier for us to be compliant and very much at the forefront of all these concerns.
Kai-Fu, you've worked all over the world. You are very familiar with all the different systems. What does privacy look like in the AI era? And I imagine there's going to be different takes on that in different parts of the world.
Yeah, I think some cultures embrace privacy as a fundamental part and the highest priority part of that culture. And that's why Germany and US and China may be at different levels of the spectrum. But I also believe fundamentally every user does not want his or her data to be leaked or used to hurt himself or herself. So I think GDPR is actually a very good first step, even though I disagree with some of the way in which it was implemented and some of the effect it has on companies. I think every government should put a stake in the ground and say, these are the steps that we will take to protect privacy. There are also many components. I think some people think China is a country which privacy is unimportant, but it's actually not quite the case. The government actually has very, very strong rules on the resale and sharing of data that doesn't belong to you. In fact, it's subject to imprisonment. So the case of Facebook and the Cambridge Analytica, if that were to happen in China, it would actually be punished stronger. So China's chosen to sort of basically regulate data first from making sure whichever company, whether it's Alibaba or Tencent, that captures your data, it stays within the corporate walls. And that as a first step. And then I think there are other things all governments should look at and implement.
While we're on the geopolitics of all this, and this is something you write a ton about, and it's also one of the topics that really gets a lot of attention. I have a feeling I know some of the answers to this. Which are the countries that are positioned to be in the conversation when it comes to AI? Which are the companies that are well positioned to be big players for both of you?
Yeah. So,
go ahead.
Okay, I'll start. Well, my view is pretty clear. The title of my book, AI Superpowers, basically says there will only be two superpowers, and it's US and China. And some of you may think it's very strange. US invented all this stuff. How could China possibly have a seat at the same table? And the reason is exactly going back to what we described on what AI can do. Because we're in the phase of implementation. So an AI company is less about hiring 10 great, super smart PhDs who wrote papers, more about how to implement, build, and iterate quickly, and also more about how to pick single domains in which there's value, and also about how much data you can gather. And China has a ton of data, right? If we believe in the age of AI, data is the new oil, then China is Saudi Arabia. So it's a hugely advantageous thing for Chinese companies to be able to implement and iterate. So I think to a stage that the amount of money invested in AI by venture capital is larger in China than in the US right now. So I think if we play forward on this, we can see China and US both having great expertise, companies, extract a lot of value from AI. US will continue to be way ahead in technology, but technology in AI technologies are generally generously shared through either the kind of work that Salesforce is doing or open source or TensorFlow. Those are all examples of sharing. So US is stronger in research, but implementation is faster in China. Also, internationally, China hasn't really exported software outside China, but that is beginning to happen to Southeast Asia, to Middle East, and to Africa. So I think in the end, those are countries in which Chinese software may be fairly strong over a 5-year horizon. But of course, US will continue to be strong in the developed countries.
Richard, is it a two-horse race? Is Germany out of it? Any other countries on your radar?
So I think I agree with almost all the things, but I do think it's also clear that you can still have a lot of impact as a small company, even though you don't have infinite amounts of data. There's also, you have to look at what kinds of data are being collected in different nations, right? There's probably, in terms of like video surveillance or something, like nobody will beat China. And maybe after that the UK or something, because there's CCTV cameras everywhere there. But that doesn't mean they will surpass everybody in medical applications of AI. And I can see even small startups in Silicon Valley that do blood test measurements and things like that, and simplify and speed up and make more accurate blood tests. They can collect their own data in a relatively short amount of time. You can go for a couple months, ask human experts or ask crowd workers on Amazon Mechanical Turk or Crowdflower and other companies like that to help you label your data and then actually build sort of unique and interesting data assets for specific niche markets. Of course, if you go into search, it'll be hard to beat Google. If you go into e-commerce, it'll be hard to beat Amazon and so on. And there will be very large areas where indeed it is very hard to compete. I think in general, sort of geospatially or geopolitically, there are three things that you really need to have a larger economic impact, and it's the research world, the startup world, and the large companies making big investments in AI. And then, I guess, to some degree, also political initiatives where the government says, we're going to support with billions of dollars research into these various aspects.
So that sounds to me like US and China. Are there others that are on your radar that are, again, maybe not poised to compete with Google or Amazon or Tencent, but are kind of establishing themselves as a niche, the leading experts in smart cars or smart transportation or smart medicine? Are there countries that are standing out from the rest of the world?
There is unfortunately a big drop-off after those two, indeed. And I think we see this in France and a couple of other countries that they're all saying, okay, we want to get on it too, but it hasn't fully happened yet. And in some cases it's hard, right? Like getting a startup ecosystem, getting venture capitalists to go and start investing in countries or around universities and seeking PhD students who have done interesting research in AI and see if they can help them commercialize that. That is an ecosystem that's not easy to build. And even in the US, there are a lot of cities and areas all over the world that say, we want to build the Silicon Valley of this area. And it's hard. It's hard to do that. It takes in some cases, decades.
I mean, in general, what I've seen be most successful is, and I see this all the time, I get invitations to go to Transylvania, which is the Silicon Valley of it and its three neighbors. I go to Slush in Finland. There's all these different things. In general, what I've seen most successful is when a region or a country takes technology, and instead of trying to be the next Silicon Valley, they are like, what are we known for? What industries are really strong here? Where are we the experts? And how can we digitize those industries?
That's right.
Do you see examples of that happening where countries are not only digitizing their homegrown industries, but are really embracing the future of the AI? Or is it so scary? Because I think for a lot of these countries too, if you're known for being the home of fine china, porcelain, or X or Y, AI is also scary because that's what you're known for, and if the computers do it better, that's scary.
So I do think Germany, for instance, is very famous for manufacturing and is still one of the biggest export nations in the world. Maybe still the biggest, maybe it's just overtaken by China in terms of value that's being exported, right? And so there are a lot of car manufacturers, there are Siemens, manufacturers of large medical devices. I do hope, and I see again, beginnings of those developments, of them realizing, okay, the scanners of the future don't just give you an MRI scan, they give you an MRI scan with some intelligence, with an analysis of what you actually see in that scan. And those are sort of SaaS kinds of businesses. And putting my Salesforce hat on, we also help a lot of those companies become digital distributors of Adidas, for instance, and helping them be very close to their customers and realizing that that customer interaction is becoming more and more important to have that connection, to understand and make very efficient the sales, service, and marketing aspects of all those companies.
But Kai-Fu, if it's really all boiling down to data, and China is, for both size and economic and political will reasons, just way ahead on data, how does it not inevitably become China? It may be a two-horse race for a while. Is it just inevitably China's going to dominate because they have so much more data, they will get so much more data?
No, I don't think so. I think U.S. there are a couple of things U.S. really can and should do. I think first is if we look at the long term, clearly the U.S. advantage is the university system and the research system. It is not only so far ahead of all the other countries, it is a giant funnel that sucks in the smartest people from the whole world to study here, many of whom stay. We're both examples, right? You stayed, I didn't, but that is what magnifies the American population. If you think about the IQs, the top IQ in each country, theoretically, they should be equivalent to the size of a population. US has always had a huge advantage because it actually basically creamed the whole world and took the highest IQ people, many of them, through the US education system, and then many stay. So I think if US doesn't have immigration policy and the research funding policy to continue that, then that's when the China advantage might be real.
So that was going to be my next question.
Yeah.
How much damage are we doing right now by limiting immigration?
That's what I know. This is Silicon Valley. I know I agree with the view. I think it's China does not have the ability to suck in the world's highest IQ people. In China, all China can count on are the Chinese IQ. So that's limited to whatever 1/5, 1/6 of the world population. So I think the immigration policy must have in the U.S. It would be very unwise not to have a very generous policy, like everyone who has a PhD in AI should automatically get a green card or something like that.
I've heard a lot of proposals coming out of the administration. I've not heard that one yet.
Make my hiring a lot easier.
Yeah.
And also, what are the things that we should be worried about? So we've talked about general AI. Let's not spend so much time. I mean, we should, I think, spend some time. Somebody should be thinking about it. There should be, there's great work at Partnership for AI and all these groups. But what are the kinds of things that everyone should be thinking about in terms of AI? I assume it's sort of making sure that looking at where the value is going to go, that they're in the right place. But take that one step further. What are some things that your customers, Richard, should really be thinking about?
So I think there are different levels, right? As a CEO, you need to carefully think about is your entire industry going to get disrupted? Are you thinking about, if you're in car manufacturing, self-driving cars? If you're in manufacturing, robots that can automate a lot more parts of your manufacturing process. So there are a couple of areas in medicine where radiology, you can really make the analysis of a scan so much cheaper if you use AI-powered radiologists. So a couple of areas where on the CEO high level, you need to really be focused on understanding the impact that AI can have on your industry. Is it just like a minor improvement, or is it a really huge disruption? And then for the people who actually built AI, the developers, they need to be very careful about the training data that they feed into their systems. And we've seen a lot of unfortunate examples in recommendation engines, in beauty contest classification. I don't know why you'd want an AI for that, but there are issues with that. In the judicial system, where we already use machine learning algorithms to predict how many days in jail, so many days in prison somebody should be. Parole. And then some of the features are like basically thinly veiled and still include race or economic background, where if you were really poor and you couldn't pay for a parking ticket, you spend a night or two in jail, now that will makes it more likely you'll go to prison for something else. So there are a lot of issues around bias when AI touches human lives, and the people who are actually on the ground are implementing them need to very, very carefully think about it. And that's why I'm very excited to have Kathy Baxter and other people on my team now in our research to immediately infuse that ethical thinking into the entire AI workflow. And it's unfortunately not as easy as just having a checklist. We like to say that AI is a mindset, not a checklist, or AI ethics.
And I want to follow up on that. How much does it matter that as we're having these conversations around bias, it's still very likely in a room of 10 people to be 8 white men and maybe 1 person of color and maybe 1 woman trying to get rid of the bias? How much does it matter that the people in the room aren't representative?
I think diversity issues go all the way into the training data sets as well as the teams and the choices they work on. You also see this in kind of data sets that most AI experts work on. They're very much the kinds of problems that we think about in our workplace and so on. There are fewer people who think about preventing human trafficking with AI, which you can also do, and we are now starting to think about it, and we are seeking out and working and collaborating with organizations to do that, to try to protect the oceans and try to count fish or coral. Those are not the default standard data sets that most AI scientists work on, largely because we aren't diverse enough in some ways.
I think I agree with doing all the work that everyone's thinking about and doing on data bias, but also don't be too hard on the AI scientists, because humans have probably worse bias. An example is a study on Israeli judges, and they found that judges in Israel, in general, gave tougher sentences before lunch because they're hungry and not happy. So I don't think we should assume humans are saints or can be educated from bias. I mean, we should fix the data and all the things we can, but humans are not perfect.
There's actually a silver lining on this whole bias issue, which Kathy just brought up, which is it might be easier to, like, say you have an algorithm to try to predict who should get a promotion, and there may be some supermarket chains in the past who didn't promote, statistically speaking, women as often as it would make sense given the statistics, and it might actually be easier to fix one algorithm than it is to fix the mindsets of 10,000 store managers. So there is actually a potential silver lining in all of that.
I'll give you one more example. In China, there is software being implemented basically to supervise judges. Not supervise, but to take all their data and then report up to the superiors which ones might be making poor sentencing or biased decisions. So it's not making AI to be a judge, but it's kind of as an extra check and balance function on the people.
And is the AI bias issue, because China has a much more homogeneous population, it seems like not uniquely American conversation, but a distinctly American conversation when we talk about, at least around ethnicity, probably not so much gender. I think China has some gender imbalance, but still, is the AI bias issue as talked about there? Is it as pronounced? What are some of the differences if we were having this conversation there?
Probably not as much. So I think similar to privacy, people care, but not as much as here, which is consistent with the culture and values of different places. In China, people will actually talk more about security. So, AI security, we've seen recent studies that shows how you can just put some dots on people's faces and become recognized as someone else, right? The virus and the attacks on the PC and phones in the AI era is very different. You're trying to fool an AI engine into recognizing you into something you're not. So possibility of fraud. And what about hacking into a neural network and changing the parameters? How will that be detected compared to adding sources of code? So I think there's a lot more concerns about the potential physical or financial damage to people through hacking into AI.
And what are the kinds of things that you wish more people were thinking about? And it's kind of related to the what are the big things, but what isn't talked about? What's kind of the dirty little secret of the industry? Is it that things aren't as good as they're being sold as, or what are the things that aren't quite there that we pretend we go around as if they're actually further along than they are?
I still go back to the jobs question. I think there are too many optimists who think that because in the past technical revolutions have always created more jobs than destroyed, therefore this won't be an issue. There are those who don't want their companies to be viewed in a bad light and don't want to discuss the possible damage they could be causing. And there are those basically who just believe the human AI symbiosis will be great. I believe there will be many professions like creative and professional professions where the symbiosis will be great, but there will also be significant displacements. So, and I don't see a lot of countries starting to think about it.
To your point, the symbiosis really only works if the computer and the human both have a lot to offer. In a lot of these jobs,
Exactly.
the computer can actually do all of it.
Exactly.
And the interesting one that came up, radiology is brought up as one of the ones where there's going to be huge disruption. But the optimists will point out that, if you put an expert who's been doing this for 50 years and the computer, you get the best result. And they make the case, well, therefore, great, the combination of the two. The problem is you're not going to have somebody with 50 years experience, 10 years from now.
Also, I think AI gets better with data. So at the current stage, human radiologist plus a system will do better than either. But as the more data is collected and AI keeps getting better, it's like AlphaGo, right? So I think if radiologists AI continues to develop for 10 or 15 years, even the 50-year experienced human radiologist may not be the AI.
Well, I think there are certain places where we will always continue to need radiologists. As an example, where there might be new diseases that come out that will always need new training data. I think the run-of-the-mill radiologist who just finds like very obvious things, those things will probably get more and more automated. But we've observed directly inside Salesforce, for instance, that our chatbots actually get in the end a higher customer satisfaction score if the incoming request was dealt with by an algorithm and a person. The algorithm very quickly gets to the right issue, summarizes, asks the right question, and then the person makes the final call, actually getting pulled in when the AI might not know how to move any further in the next step. So there are some cases, but again, it depends. I think.
And to Kai-Fu's point, is that just because today the AI isn't good enough? Do you think that in a year or two?
I think it depends. Like there are some jobs where you'll be more on that spectrum, and I think I often go back to history. 150 years ago, over 90% of people worked in agriculture. I don't think 90% of this room is bummed out they weren't working in the field all day today. So I think in the long term, I'm very optimistic. But in the short term, I agree that the potential job loss and potential reskilling of people is going to be very crucial, and having a social system that kind of buffers that and helps people, a social safety net, is really crucial. But in terms of your question of other things that worry me, I think AI has this not just dual use, but omni-use kind of capability. And because we open source everything in the research community, you can use these algorithms, literally you can use the same code base of an open source package to classify different kinds of breast cancer and save women's lives, but you can also use it to build a shoot not shoot classifier. It's just your training data. You can throw it in, you can throw anything into it and create crazy AIs that, or specific algorithms that do things that we might not want to use. And so it's kind of an interesting balance of this openness that we have in the research community and just giving the tools to everybody they can be misused too.
And we've had that, like, Google has demonstrated this technology to create these incredibly convincing fake videos of people saying things that they never said. And that technology is really close. I would put it in a couple of years. You can make a video. There's enough video out there of Kai-Fu talking. We can make him say, "I love Salesforce," which you guys might love. He might not like so much. And
It's okay, I love Salesforce.
okay, well, there you go. Now they don't need to do the deep fake. But Google says, don't worry about it. We're going to watermark it. We're going to label it. We're going to use it responsibly. Even if you trust Google that they're going to do all that, as soon as that technology is democratized, somebody isn't going to do that. How concerned do we need to be, to your point, of not the big companies, not the big countries maybe, but just the rogue use of these technologies? Like, it's one thing to have all the big companies get together and make pacts of how they're going to use it. You can have international treaties.
That's a big issue.
That's right. Yeah, like I
agree.
just
I
said,
don't have an answer.
So
It's
rogue
omni
use,
use. It's out there. It's open source.
I mean, we've all seen the video, right, of the drone plus face recognition plus firing a bullet.
I do think some of that is a little overhyped because you can just do this and then the face recognition is not going to recognize.
so you just walk around like this, which, given
If a
that we're
drone is
all on
flying
our
around with a gun in the
smartphones-
room, yeah, just go like that.
And given that we're all on our smartphones, really, we're just, all we have to do is.
That's right.
So there's a bunch of stuff around the fear stuff. There's a bunch of stuff, privacy, jobs. What has you excited? What has you go, yeah, there are these things we need to solve, but I've seen AI do this. What are a couple things you've seen AI do that actually blow your minds that AI can do?
So many. So I guess on the Salesforce side, the ability to understand language a lot better. We have now algorithms where we can train a single algorithm to do 10 different kinds of language tasks. Like you can ask the same algorithm, what is the summary of this Wikipedia article? What is the sentiment of this tweet? Who is the president of this company? Like you can ask the same algorithm all these different kinds of questions, and then you can even ask it questions it's never seen before, where you can describe a new story, a new scenario, and then it still gets sometimes right answers. So in terms of the research, there's a lot of exciting progress. And in terms of seeing that research being applied to make companies much more productive, that's really exciting. Now, outside Salesforce, there's a ton of excitement too. Also with chatbots, actually, that help sometimes people talk through their issues. There are chatbots companies like Hugging Face or Replica that basically allow people to just chat with a bot. And some people say, oh, that's sad, and why aren't they talking to their friends? But it's like, well, you don't always want to burden all your friends with everything. And it's kind of, to me, like writing a journal or a diary where, but a diary that asks you back and asks you how you actually were and how did that meeting go yesterday that you were so worried about and things like that. So I think that has helped people a lot through issues. Medical applications are super exciting. In some ways, you might call it cynical, but I feel like it's realistic to say, in medicine, you don't care about creating jobs. You care about creating healthy people quickly and cheaply. And if you can do that with an AI and make good decisions or make blood tests cheaper or radiology, like scans, you can go through population studies where you go through all the scans of a hospital of the last 2 years and see if anything was missed. Any doctor had missed an important diagnosis of a million scans that you had gone through the last couple of years. So there are companies working in that. Even agriculture, there are ways you can use robotics and computer vision to, for instance, a company called Blue River that's recently acquired to basically water each lettuce leaf in one at a time, looking exactly how much water each needs, when is each one ripe for picking, how to get rid of weeds around the things you want to pick. And that allows you to use less pesticides, waste less water, things like that. So there's just so many exciting applications in all different industries where I think long-term humanity can definitely be better off with that technology.
Kai-Fu, what are a couple things that have you excited?
Okay, well, since we're in China and we're mostly about implementation, I'll give you a few examples. We have one company that has an app that you can download, and if you want to borrow money, it determines in 2 or 3 seconds and zaps it right to your phone. I think it'll displace the future of personal loans that you have in banks. We have a company that's able to basically have a cashierless store. But the amazing thing is it's a little machine with computer vision that's $800, and you can just, whatever you want to buy, just put it on a tray, not too much overlap, but on the tray, it recognizes everything at once. It's not one scan at a time. And then lastly, we have a replacement for McDonald's. We have autonomous fast food. So you go in, it recognizes your face, and then you tell it what you want to eat. And it's Chinese food, of course, beef noodles, fishball noodles. It makes it for you, and the robot arm puts it out, and you eat it. And the whole fast food only costs about $1.50. So McDonald's is like $5. So that's the kind of fun things that's really happening. These are real stores you can go in and use right now.
So I hope we've started a great conversation that we need to continue as a society. We need to continue it well beyond today. I want to leave you with 3 things you can do to keep having the conversation. The first, Kai-Fu Lee has a new book out. You can check that out. I think you said there's some copies out here.
Yeah, AI Superpowers.
AI Superpowers, if you don't get it out here, available from your favorite cashierless or online store. Richard, you have a session from 5 to 6 today at the Marriott Marquis.
That's right, at Marriott at 5 p.m., the future of artificial intelligence.
And I write about these issues and more in a free daily technology newsletter for Axios. It's called Login. If you go to getlogin.axios.com, I'll come to you every morning. And if you hit reply, you don't get an AI bot, you get me directly. So thank you all very much. Appreciate your time and patience.
Thanks for coming, everybody.